I had somebody saying that he feeds his horse kabsa and the horse is fine with eating kabsa, and he's, you know, mashallah, if you look at the horse, he's very healthy and he's, you know, really doing great.
أهلا وسهلا بكم في حلقة جديدة من بودكاست حوار بيطري. معكم دكتورة شيرين عادل القزاز، واليوم ويانا أستاذة حنين. العمل مع حيوانات ذكية ومرحة بشكل استثنائي مثل مجال الخيول له روحانية مختلفة ومشاعر مختلفة ومفاجآت متفاوتة الأطياف والألوان. يزيد جمال هذا التنوع وجود تفاوت في التخصصات والخبرات والجنسيات في مكان واحد. يساعد هذا التمازج والانسجام لخلق بيئة عمل تسهم في العمل الجماعي والإبداع في الكوادر الطبية البيطرية. ولأن الطبيب البيطري ليس وحيدا في عالم الخيل، ضيفتنا لهذه الحلقة هي أحد الأشخاص الذين يساهمون في خلق بيئة عمل تتشارك فيها الخبرات والأفكار، وأحد الكوادر الذين يعتمد عليهم الطبيب البيطري أو الطبيبة البيطرية بشكل أساسي في الاسطبلات ومستشفيات الخيول. ولا غنى عن وجودهم ولا عن خبراتهم العظيمة، والتي تهدف إلى خلق بيئة مناسبة تسهم في الحفاظ على صحة الخيل. تنويه، راح نتكلم في هذه الحلقة باللغة الإنجليزية مع أستاذة حنين. So welcome Haneen to our dialogue. We are so glad that we have you between us. So first question, it will be introduce yourself.
My name is Kيرستن Jonston. I go by the nickname of Hanين, and I'm from the States, but I have been living in Saudi Arabia for 24 years. I grew up with horses. My neighbors and I had a collection of, and my horse was an American quarter horse, and my neighbors had standard bred, thoroughbred ponies. And so from all of our neighbors, we used to be involved with horse life. After I raised my children, I felt a deep sense of something missing, and that was my participation in horse life or horse activities. So I gradually met other people that were involved with horse jumping and breeding, and then introduced also to the Arabian beauty contest, which was something very new to me. While I was getting more involved and asking me for support or questions through my Instagram account, I realized that I had a vacuum of knowledge that I needed to fill. And in order to be able to support the community here, I decided to go back to university and take or obtain a degree in horse science. So this is mainly dealing with the management of horses, and that covers different kinds of topics such as biosecurity, which is how to prevent and manage different diseases that are transferable from horses even to people. And then also the maintenance, the food, training, and so on. So that my knowledge will be more rounded.
So interesting. I want to ask you regarding to riding horses. Did you try to ride a horse before? And how it was your experience?
So yes, with my quarter horse, we used to ride even without the saddle, without, we'll just jump on them in the pasture. I don't recommend that because you need to really build up a good relationship with the horse and the body signals that you use in order to control a horse without any tack. Also, and we see this very much around all of in our areas, that people are riding without safety helmets. And to be honest, I used to do that. But in hindsight, when I look back at some of the accidents that I did have, I was just very lucky. And I really highly recommend that whenever somebody is riding, that they are wearing at least the helmet. So riding has many different kinds of disciplines. You've got your backyard rider that is not concerned with much. versus dressage, which is concerned with every minute detail of how we sit on the horse, the pressure of our legs, the way that we sit on the horse even, and then we go into saddle fitting. So for horseback riding, the amount of information is very, very vast, and people can take many different directions of interest.
Totally agree with you that the safety of the rider is so important while they are riding the horses. Mrs. Haneen, we want to talk more about the equine sciences.
So the equine science, again, the field is very, very diverse and has many very deep topics. I think that in when we look to the scientific aspect of equine science, we could start with the genomes, the new study of the genetic of horses. And if we go back thousands of years ago to how horses were domesticated and used, and how their physical features have changed over time and with their use, how human intervention has gone into changing different aspects of breeds. And I think if we look at the Arabian horse, we can see a lot of this, where we are now getting, they might want to say Egyptian, pure Egyptian, where the qualities of this particular strain of Arabian, they are looking for long, slender legs, long, slender necks, very refined faces, to the point where some veterinarians are pushing back against this development because the very, very slender face can constrict the nasal channel to where the horse is not really able to take in the amount of air that they need for any kind of sport activities. When we talk about the longer legs, is the horse able to eat from the ground? If the neck did not also, the genes that we're giving that horse or that the horse is obtaining from the parents, if the neck is not equally as long as what the legs are, then we're faced with the horse really not being able to eat from the ground, which is the natural position. And so again, when we get into the science of horses, you see people hanging the hay nets high up in the air, or I've seen some people with even the lightweight barrels, and they're hanging it from the ceiling and saying, this is good. The horse has to work to get to eat the food, and it's kind of play. But yet, because they don't have the knowledge behind them, they don't understand that when the horse is trying to eat from a high level, the flap that covers the trachea that goes into the windpipe or the lungs is not completely closed. So if the horse is eating and there are very minute particles or dust particles or things that are in the hay, that can enter into the lungs and cause pulmonary pneumonia. So really, even with different owners, we need to have this kind of information available to us.
Yes, true. I want to ask you regarding to your study about the equine science, about the main problems that you faced on the warfare of the horses. What do you think about it? What is a warfare problem?
Well, that's a very interesting point, Dr. Shireen. I think, and I see that from some of the other students in my courses, that a lot of people are taking these courses to help support the welfare causes of the equine industry, whether we're going and talking about horse racing, or we're seeing, the backyard owner that is not feeding the horse in a proper way or providing proper housing for the horses. So the difficulty that I personally am facing is that the knowledge of the owners or riders or trainers even is not always based on factual information. In one of my groups this past week, I had somebody saying that he feeds his horse kabsa, and the horse is fine with eating kabsa, and he's, you know, mashallah, if you look at the horse, he's very healthy and he's, you know, really doing great. And we've got the same thing with owners that are really, I don't know how to explain this to you, but dedicated or convinced passionately about feeding their horses bran, or in Arabic we say nakhala. And what I've understood from my courses and discussion with some equine nutritionists in Kuwait, she's a marvelous German lady, and also some veterinarians here who was even discussing that even for camels to be feeding only nakhala and not understanding the chemical ratios of, for example, the calcium and the phosphorus. When the phosphorus is at such a high level and the calcium is very low, the body of the animal will do its best to balance the blood chemistry so that the calcium is higher than the phosphorus, because especially in horses, we need it to be, you know, a 2-to-1 ratio. And this is the typical that you would have 2 parts of calcium to 1 part of phosphorus. And, you know, there can be some fluctuation in this ratio, but not to a great degree. And if you have very high, let's say 6-to-1 of phosphorus to calcium, then the body turns around and pulls the calcium out of the bones to be able to balance the blood chemistry so that the cells of the body can function properly. If the owners don't understand this, or don't, let me put it this way, appreciate the value of this information, what happens long term is that the horse or the camel is more likely to break legs. We've had camels where you've got 2 male camels fighting with each other, and they end up breaking their mandible because the bones are so weak. So this is the biggest struggle, is to get people to understand about the you know, the nutritional care that a horse needs, because the digestive system for horses is so completely different than sheep or cows or even camels, that we need to protect the cecum, or the biome, the good and bad bacteria, the balance that is in the cecum, which is the large intestine, part of the large intestine where the food is digested. If we feed very high sugar products to the horse, and we've got some people that are not feeding hay at all and feeding the horse only on grains, that this is causing a great stress on the equine digestive system. So the people, you know, whether it's financially or just, you know, their ideas that, you know, wow, I'm giving my horse the best I can give because I'm feeding them these expensive grains, they're actually inadvertently harming the horse instead of, you know, doing the best for them, which is what their intention is. So again, we go back to the need for correct information. I hope that I'm not going off topic too much, but again, this, and making this very long, but we go also now into medicating our horses and the welfare of horses in general. So let me just touch on these 2 topics, because I feel very passionately about these 2 issues. We're talking about something that in the Middle East is called malaria. And this is not the correct name. It's called babesia. And babesia comes in 2 different forms. You've got cavalli and equi. Cavalli is usually affecting cows. Equi is what affects the horses. However, there are many cases where horses also are infected with the babesia cavalli. And the treatment for these 2 is similar, but there is a difference in the protocol or timing for the injections of the imidocarb, which is the medication used, and how to give this injection to horses. We've had some horses die because the grooms or owners are giving this injection incorrectly. And secondly, we need to understand that there is a myth where they are saying that the imidocarb, or the brand name here in Saudi is imizol, that this is an immunization. It is not an immunization, it is a treatment only. And it is effective on the horse for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then the viability or effectiveness of this medication is then removed from the body. And my question is, we've got stables where every 6 months all of the horses get injection of this medication, whether the horse has the illness or not, because they're viewing this as we would the rabies injection, the tetanus injection, the equine influenza, or the herpes, where these are annual immunizations. However, again, the imidocarb is treatment, it's not an immunization. Owners are responsible for the health of the animals that they are entrusted with. And so if you find symptoms that the horse is not eating well, apathetic, their mood is low, no energy, they start to lose weight, then it is highly necessary to take a blood test and send it to a laboratory. And here in Saudi, even the equine hospital is using a human laboratory. And so there is no reason when it comes to the babesia or malaria, as they call it, that they withdraw blood in the correct kind of vials and within a few hours send it to a human laboratory and request a smear where they test for, in Arabic it's called tufayli, and the parasites in the blood. If there are no parasites, my question to the owners and even veterinarians is, why are we giving horses this very difficult injection if the horse is not infected with this parasite? That's one issue. The second issue is the over and misuse of antibiotics and wormers. The protocol for worm medication is changing. In the past, we used to just give every 3 months, give all 60 head of horses the worm medication, and on schedule. So we're getting away from that because of over and misuse of the wormer is causing resistance to the medication. The worms are no longer being sensitive to the use of the worm medication. And we are at a loss now when we are losing horses to death of worm impaction, or that the health of the horse deteriorates so much because the burden of worms that they're carrying is so heavy because the medication is no longer working. And there are no new wormers currently in the process of being developed that are effective. So it is necessary to understand that through the different research, and then again, here we go back to the equine science and the need for people to learn, even if we do workshops with each other. It takes somebody who's got information and it's based on scientific information, not just what their great grandfather did. Okay, and I'm not dissing that, طب العربي, for example, that there's no value in that. There is. But I do believe that it has to be somehow balanced or in conjunction with scientific research. If we go back and see from this research that they found that only 20% of the horse population, so let's say we've got 100 horses in our stable, only 20 of those horses are really infected with worms, and they carry around 80% of the burden of the worm infections. So it is not useful, it is detrimental for us to give all of those 100 horses the worm medication. Moving on to the antibiotics. Again, we're having misuse and overuse of antibiotics. And I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of veterinarians in our area that for anything that happens to the horse, penicillin, penicillin, penicillin. And how many people don't even understand that when you're injecting the penicillin into the muscle, that you need to verify that you have not hit a blood vessel, because mixing the penicillin into the blood system can be fatal. Uh, there has to be, even from the veterinarians, if they've got correct information, I believe that they need to inform their patients, the owners, about these kind of important issues. If we're overusing and misusing these antibiotics, again, we're getting resistance to the antibiotics, and then we're at a loss of what can we use, in the future for treating different kinds of horse infections. And keeping in mind that some of these infections, streptococcus and so on, and you've got different varieties of these bacteria, that some of these diseases are zoological, which means that humans can also take on these bacteria and become sick with some of these, for example, diphtheria. So it's very important that we are aware of antibiotics resistance and how we should be, and in what cases do we give the antibiotics so that we don't overuse it. And finally, I would say the worst, most difficult thing to see as somebody working with horses, especially when you've got people who are breeding, that they don't understand how to calculate what kind of food and how much food that mare needs to be able to produce a healthy, solid foal. And then in the next 4 months of nursing, to the point that the mare is now just simply skin and bones. And then they turn around and breed her again. And I'm asking them, from what resources that mare is going to produce a winner, whether it's for racing or riding or horse beauty contests, that foal is going to be born with some kind of deficiency or some kind of a defect due to malnutrition. And I really firmly believe that we need to support owners with the proper kind of information to alleviate the suffering that a lot of these horses are going through. And Shireen, I'm sorry for this long discussion, but I feel that all of this is really critical information. And turning it back to you.
No, at all, especially that as I am a veterinary doctor, I faced the same problem regarding to the AMR, antimicrobial resistance. And it's because of the breeders and the owners that they give random medications and antibiotics and treatments for the horses. So it's we supposed to give some advices for them. And so that's why I want to ask you, what is your advice for the breeders or the owners that they give random medications or treatments for the horses, and how we can control it as a specialist, as a veterinarian, as a doctors, how we can control this problem? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that control is an impossible goal. If we wanted to really go for high standards, then it would have to come through the ministries, whether it's the agricultural or also the Ministry of whichever is responsible for import and licensing of medications. As a host owner, as a mother of children, there have been many times where I've been so grateful, actually, that I can go to any pharmacy and purchase the antibiotics that I know that I need, because after a certain amount of experience, you know that, okay, that child has an infection and needs an antibiotic, and you've known through experience which antibiotics to give. But what percentage of our population would fit into that category where they have the knowledge necessary to be able to know when and how and what to use? I think that that's maybe quite low. And so it comes then to government bodies to regulate the use of these medications through the requirement of prescriptions. And I know that that would place a huge burden on society in general, because we've gotten so used to the availability and ease and the reduction of cost. Because, for example, like in the States, when my kids got sick or the horse gets sick, you need to go and hire the veterinarian or the doctor, pay the doctor's fee, and then turn around and purchase the medication. So you're almost doubling the cost to yourself by necessitating the need of a prescription. But I think if we're going to talk what is the society, what is the best choice for society, I think it would start with governing bodies regulating the availability of these medications. And again, you know, it would make my life very difficult, but I think that that's the necessary choice for certain medications. The second step, I think, would be is that when, you know, we say bedside manners when we're talking about human doctors, but this, I think, also applies to veterinarians, that you've got some veterinarians that just come in and, you know, okay, your horse has this and this and this, and this is a medication, buy. And the reason for that is because we don't have enough veterinarians, and they're overworked and underpaid, to be honest. And, you know, the amount of time that they have to spend with each patient is very minimal. You will not find such a doctor like one of the doctors that here is in Saudi Arabia that I work with on a regular basis. He's so busy. Trying to get a hold of the guy is like almost impossible. And you know, even, you know, early in the morning he's in the field up until maybe 11 o'clock at night he's in the field, and they give from themselves and from even their families so much passion and so much love for these animals, but time doesn't allow them to really interact with the owners the way that owners need. And by that I mean that when I'm telling the person, okay, here's the penicillin, we need to, this is how you inject it, this is where you inject it, this is how much you need to give, and only use the penicillin at this moment because we don't want to have a problem later on, and explain to them the importance of how to use the medications. Why am I using this medication? For example, the antihistamines. You know, the other day was dealing with somebody. I forgot what the problem that they were facing, but it was an allergic reaction. And the first thing that he says, oh, I was told to use dexamethasone. And I was like, okay, I've got a headache and I'm gonna go take a bottle of morphine. And this is the example that I use with them. And it's like, if you have a headache starting, go take a Panadol. If it gets worse in 4 hours, then you will take an Advil. You know, don't go for the codeine or the morphine from the minute that you feel a slight amount of pain. And when I bring it to their attention in this kind of way, they understand. And I'm like, go use the Histaminil or the Allervet. Do that first. And if you see that it's not working, and the biggest thing that I'm facing is that a lot of vets, because they are in such a rush, and بالأسف, just like in the human medication, we do have some veterinarians that should not be licensed, but they need to explain what the medication is and how it works and why they're giving it. And they need to always go back, and I think that this is why a lot of people find that the way that I'm dealing with them is different, because I'm asking them, what is the cause of this issue? Okay, let's say that the horse has an allergic reaction to something. What caused the allergy? Is it a bite from an insect? Is it a mold that was in the persimmon or in the hay? Is it also possibly mold in the grains because they were stored improperly? Is it high protein in you know, a cow feed that you're giving, or even I think in cow feed there's also some kind of preservative or some kind of an additive that they give to cows that is toxic for horses. And so again, here we go back with the knowledge or the information, and people trying, especially now with the cost of food increasing, people are feeding bread to the horses. And they see that the horse is fine, so they're going to continue, but they don't understand the internal damage that is being done to the horse's body because the horse looks okay. So these kind of welfare issues are really critical. People need to be asked. The vets need to get to what we call evidence-based medicine, and not just something based on, I think that this is the case, so let's try this. We need to get away from these kinds of behaviors, Shireen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with you, especially that we need for strict regulations to control these issues for the veterinarians and for the owners and for all the people that they use the random medications. And at the same time, I see that like they love their animals, they love their horses, but in the same time they hurt them by medications or by bad management or careless. Not all of them, but some of them like that. And I cannot understand how they love them, and in the same time they do a lot of mistakes, hard mistakes, unacceptable mistakes that it's lead to sometimes to the death. It's a very bad thing. Yes, I see it in my career actually, especially that I am a member in FEI. I see a lot of problems like that. Sometimes I saw horses that they faced a problem with a lameness that we cannot control it or cannot treat it, and the owner he become too angry. In the same time, he know that he is the one that he did that. Sometimes they know that the horse cannot go to the loop 2, for example, but they said to us, no problem, he can go. No, he cannot go, he cannot go. How is this different emotions that I love my horse, but I hurt it, or I make a bad things for him. So we need a strict regulations for the warfare, for the animals, and for the treatments and for the medications. As you said, it's supposed to be by prescriptions to control it. We are going to move for the next question. Back to you, as you are in between the horse owners and between the doctors, vets. Explain to us the relationship between the equine scientist and the owners, and the relationships between the equine scientist also and the veterinarian.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Shireen. This is an interesting question because the knowledge that an equine scientist obtains through their education and maybe their practical experience is quite different than a veterinarian, and they cannot replace a veterinarian. And unfortunately, a lot of people maybe due to lack of finding a veterinarian, turn to people that are equine scientists. And there are certain cases where we were able to help. But when it comes to really critical, difficult issues, for example, let's say broken bones, internal medical issues that, whether it's torsion or different types of severe colic, the equine scientist will maybe not be able to help as much as what a veterinarian should be consulted. Um, and I guess maybe we're working more towards working with owners in education versus just treatment. So it's kind of filling a gap in the market uh, where we are trying to support the work that the veterinarian does, but need to be careful with the understanding that we never ever can replace the knowledge and experience that a veterinarian has. And, there might be some people that are so, either let's say they're so passionate that they're going to go for that, or, and here I will shoot the Arabic word takabbur, that they are so proud of themselves or proud of their position or their knowledge that they feel that they can replace that. And I disagree with this point that, we need to encourage owners to always go back and rely on the knowledge and information that a veterinarian has, where they're basically just to support. And in some cases, I've had some, this is years ago, a girl had a horse that was colicking, and she was like begging me for help. And that was in the beginning of my career, I wouldn't say career, but in starting of my process, where I didn't really have a lot of knowledge, and was telling her, well, you can give the Phenadine to relax the pain, and just walk them and get them moving to help get the gases out and so on. But you really need a veterinarian to come out, because really I thought the horse was going to die. When you see the way that the horse was, maybe she was hours away of the horse dying. And she's like, we don't have any vets. And I was, what do you mean you don't have any vets? And I said, okay, just a minute. And then I got online and through the internet, just started searching different large stables, and contacted one of them, and I said, do you know of any veterinarians? And they said, yes, we have one in our stable. And I said, would you mind sharing? And so then it comes to networking, and you're working with people just to network to solve different kinds of problems.
I would like to thank you about this valuable informations. Um, Really, if you are talking about that, we have a veterinarian and we have an owners and we have equine specialist, and every everyone has his specialist or has his career. So thank you for this point, but we cannot do anything without the people same like you, Hanin. Of course, we cannot do anything. We are cooperation together. We are cooperate together to, uh, as I said, it's a one health for the health of the animals, for the health of the human, and for even the environmental health. So that's why I would like to thank you about this valuable note, especially the last one. I would like to move for your advice for the owners from your experience, especially in this hot weather. As you see here in the GCC, we have a very high temperature. So give us some notes or some advice how we can keep our horses safe from this high temperature. Back to you.
So yes, I'm sure that in the Gulf countries it's even worse due to the humidity. But even here in Riyadh, the hospital is full of cases of colic. And so this goes back again to management of the two things, the horse environment that he's living in, as well as the management of the food that the horse is ingesting. Um, it's difficult if you have outdoor, for example, where I've got my horse currently, it's an outdoor sand rooms, and the availability of electricity maybe is not always available, not handy or not practical. But if there were a possibility, even if somebody were to invest in solar panels and install fans, so when you've got air that is moving, somehow the horses can manage with the hot air, especially if there's a shaded area. I've had owners that are like, no, the Arabian horse is in the desert anyway, and they're used to this. ويدبر نفسه يعني. No, they need to be given the choice of whether they want to stand under the sun or they want a shaded area. And it's just really important that there has to be some kind of air movement that can help the horse to cool down while he's in the shaded area of the stall that he's in. I've seen different stables being constructed, and I'm really sorry to say that again here we're dealing with a lack of knowledge or lack of understanding regarding the space that we give the horses to be in. So if you're going to put a horse in a stall that has high walls and is only 3 by 3 meters, or in some cases, you won't believe me, 2.5. And when I asked the owner why are they constructing the stalls to be so tiny, that really you're risking the horse to be impaled on the wall. When he lays down, he cannot stand back up. And if the horse stays like that overnight, you're risking colic or even death. So why take that risk? And secondly, I would say 80% of the horses in that stable had, and the word has gone away from me at the moment, but meaning that they have bad behaviors, whether it's wind sucking, cribbing, kicking the doors, weaving back and forth, head shaking, all of these different kinds of behaviors that are signifying to the people that that horse is suffering psychological problems due to the way that the horse is being kept. Horses were never meant to be in stalls. Horses were never meant to be in stalls. They, in their natural environment, walk and graze, walk and graze, walk and graze. And now we're turning, and this is critical in the hot summer months, where we are feeding wajbat, we are giving meals to an animal that is meant to eat all day long. In the natural environment, a horse will eat 16 hours out of 24. And the size of the stomach and design of the digestive system of a horse cannot manage with these 3 meals a day. They really can't. And so you will find that owners think that, especially when they're giving grains, I just, the air went out of my lungs the other day when somebody was telling me in Egypt he's feeding his horse 7 kilograms of grain on a daily basis. And I was like, God help you, because nothing else will save that horse with the way that you're feeding it. During the summer, the grains need to be reduced. The heaviness of a grain meal on a small stomach in this heat is meaning that you're asking trouble to your horse, whether it's colic or impaction. And even a lot of people, they are not soaking the grains. So then, and if they are soaking it, maybe they're soaking it for too many hours. Therefore, fermentation starts to develop in the water and the grains, which is then again toxic to the horse. So we're walking a very fine line where there has to be some water added to the grains to soften the digestion, but we don't want to do it 3 hours before. So what kind of management do we have with the workers? How much trust and reliability do we have with our workers to do the appropriate job? For me as a horse owner, it is critical that my horse be given a hay net. The hay has been gently rinsed, and this is during the summer because again we don't want the heat to mold or to start bacteria growing inside the middle of the hay in the net. Gratefully, I live in Riyadh, so it's very dry, so I'm not so worried about that, but it's something that owners need to consider. When the hay is hung in the room, the horse can eat slowly throughout the day, and I don't have to worry that he's going 2-3 hours on an empty stomach, and then you've got the acid that's splashing up in the stomach. And I think the report was saying something like 75 to 80% of horses have some episodes of ulceration in the stomach due to improper feeding protocol. During the summer, the water is really important. Yani if you're putting the water first thing in the morning and you expect it to be drank out of all day long and all night long, the horse, especially in the afternoon, will not want to drink the water because it's too hot. I often ask my owners or the caretakers, you as a human being, that glass of water, okay, horses don't drink refrigerated water, will be, reasonable. But again, are you willing to drink that glass of water that has been sitting in the sun? And how does that hot water feel on your stomach? And again, we're not sipping it like we would sip a tea. We're drinking it like we're thirsty and we need water. That water is very heavy on the stomach. So if we think about, and this is something that I'm very grateful for the courses that I took in the university, because I haven't lived in places with snow in 30 years. So the considerations that those people go through is much different than the considerations that we do here in the Gulf. We're trying to see how can we cool the water down. They're needing, in the wintertime when the water freezes over, how can we keep the water at a drinkable temperature? The use of apple cider vinegar is very good in trying to keep the water palatable. This also, if you get your horse used to the apple cider vinegar, when the horse travels for jumping competitions, beauty contests, and the flavor of the water somewhere else is different, the apple cider vinegar will mask or slightly cover the change in the flavor of the water, because a lot of horses will get dehydrated when you travel because they don't like the new water. I also like putting it during the summer. Somehow I feel, it will help the water to stay a little bit cooler. It is critical that the bucket that is used, even for those fancy, nice stables where they've got the automatic water bowls, they still need to be cleaned at least once a week, especially during the summer, because bacteria and the mold or the algae, especially in the big buckets, will start to grow very quickly. So unless you're cleaning and sterilizing those buckets on a weekly basis, you will find a slime of green on the bottom and sides of the bucket, or possibly black. I had to ask for my bucket to be cleaned out with Clorox. And we need to keep in mind that when the workers are taught how to use these disinfectants, they need to understand that after using it, the water buckets need to be thoroughly rinsed to remove any residue of whatever product you're using. Chlorine can be somehow toxic, even in small amounts. I don't like chlorine in the water. So these are the two really important. You've got the fan to keep the air moving. You've got lowering or removing of the grains and feeding, increasing the amount of rhodus or different kinds of hay during the summer season. And it is critical that we don't leave the horses standing in the stalls, even if it's a big stall. On a daily basis, that horse needs to be taken out and walked. Not necessarily you want to get them all hot and sweaty, but they need to walk to keep their intestines moving. And the last really important advice that I have during the summer months, and it's critical, that when you shower your horse, we've got the people that are showering them thinking that the water is going to evaporate and cool my horse down. And this is not correct. If you're going to shower or even just rinse your horse with water, you must use the rubber wiper, those semicircle little handles that have the rubber piece at the end, to squeegee and remove as much of the water from between the hairs as you can, and then take a towel and finish drying the horse with a towel, and then walk the horse so that there's an airflow to help cool the horse down. When we leave water on the horse and it becomes like a blanket in between all of the hairs, it acts as a thermos, and it will actually do the opposite of what we're intending to do and critically increase the internal temperature of the horse. Again, my last rinse, if I were doing the work myself, I would have like one of those like a watering can or something where I'm putting apple cider vinegar or even the white vinegar into like a finjan qahwa, in an Arabic coffee cup or a teacup of vinegar into this water bucket that I will pour over the horse as a final rinse if I've used shampoo to also help cool the horse down. But again, we need to remove the water before we, leave the horse. Another point, some people are using the medicated oils or hair oils for beauty, but the horse is underneath the sun. You're giving your horse a sunburn by use of oil and then keeping them underneath the sun. A lot of people will not think of this. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of owners, and we might ask ourselves, like, how can that be? But I had one of my Instagram followers, and I went to privately and I let him have it and yelled at him, why are you slamming the bit in his mouth in this way? Why are you making him stop in such a drastic, severe way? You're causing him pain. And the guy was flabbergasted, and he's like, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that this causes pain to the horse. It's so difficult for me to understand that, but sincerely, the guy had no idea that his behavior was causing the horse pain. And in horseback racing and so on, where they're using the whip, they think, no, the horse is really big animal. He's got thick skin and can stand it. And I'm like, are you sure that the horse can stand the way that you're whipping his rump during the race when that skin is so sensitive that it can feel a fly land on it, and then he shakes his skin to remove the fly? So how can you balance that information, if you think about it? But yeah, those are the things that I find the most important for during the summer months.
I agree with you. I want to tell you about something that happened with me actually. I talk with owner. He told me, Doc, you talk about the horses and the summer. Yes, I wrote a topic in the newspaper about keep your horses away from the sun. Do you know what he said to me? He said to me that the horses can withstand high temperatures, but unfortunately, he didn't know that they can die from the dry weather, from the hot temperature, or for the high temperature, from the dust. Even they faced a lot of problems, the same like the colic or same like the heat stroke. So that's why we supposed to provide, as an owner, he's supposed to provide the water 24 hours. And if you want to make like a walking for his horses, it's supposed to be in the sunset and the early morning. Good nutrition, as you said, it's too important. It's essential, and it's necessary to keep our horses in a good health, especially in the summer. Hair removal also is necessary. It's important to make like a tolerate for this high temperature. And um, actually, I want to say about the good ventilation is so important, especially in the rooms of the horses. It's supposed to be heat. The walls that it resists the heats. I don't know what is exactly. It's called in Arabic عازل للحرارة. It's supposed to be like that. And we faced also another problem, or we have another issue. I want to talk with you about it. The mothers that they got birth and that they have a babies or and fools in the summer, how we can keep them safe.
Well, I guess for mayors, it's not going to be that much different than it is for your normal horse. But we're more concerned now about nutrition. So how is it then that we can provide the extra nutrition that she needs for the milk or her pregnancy going through these critical months? And from the month 8 to 11 before delivery, and then the next 3 to 4 months after delivery are the most critical period for the nutrition for mares. I personally would increase the rodist and also the amount of persimmon that the mare is getting. Persimmon is very high in good protein, and also different minerals and vitamins that she would need. However, we don't want, especially for Arabian horses, we don't want to go more than 25 or 30% maximum of her total feed should be perceived. The reason for that, especially with the Arabian horse, there is a high incidence. The University of California at Davis started keeping track of the causes of illnesses of horses that come in, the food that they have been fed on a regular basis. And over time, they built up a kind of research where they found that horses that have been fed high ratios of alfalfa or persimmon have a higher incidence of entolith or intestinal stones. And these stones, if they get to a big enough size, when they are being passed through the large intestine, they often get blocked at the, and I want to use the medical term, there's an elbow in the large intestine, and they will get stuck there. So especially for mares who are pregnant, with the extra weight of the baby in that area, we need to be really careful about not feeding too much of the alfalfa, and yet she needs some. Then if we're going to calculate according to her physical needs, and that she still needs more grain in order to reach the caloric um, level that she needs, along with the nutritional needs that she has, then we need to be giving grains, but we need to do it in a way where the meals are not huge. And that is going to need more effort from the workers, the grooms. So instead of giving her 2 kilo in the morning and 2 kilo at night, we need to give 1 kilo, and then maybe after a hay meal, we give another kilo later on in the morning. Skip noon, because at the heat, let's say from 12 to 2, it should only be hay available, and never giving grains at the highest peak of heat during the day. Then in the later afternoon, you will give another kilo, and then later in the evening, let's say 7 or 8, you will give another meal. However, in the last meal of the day, we had one manager who came in and took over one of the stables where I was at, and she changed the feeding schedule from 5:30 until 10 p.m. during the summer. And she did not do this in a gradual way. She did it overnight. So one day the horses are getting food at 5:30, and the next night they were waiting until 10. And when I went into the stable, all the horses were going crazy and like banging on their doors and crying and neighing and very, very irritable. And I didn't know why. And later on found out because they were hungry. SubhanAllah, horses are like a clock. You know, you can tell what time it is simply by their behavior that they're waiting for their grain. So you want to be sure that, and then oil, adding oil. Oil offers a horse cool calories. So if you start with 50 milliliters morning and night, you can gradually increase up to a maximum of 4 to 500. We don't want to go over, I prefer not going over 400. And you will evaluate the manure or the roth that she is producing, or any horse in that fact, when we start to add oils for any horses, that if the roth is too soft, you know that you cannot continue to increase the amount of oil, because that's going to cause, you know, some intestinal disturbance maybe. You need to wait until her digestive system has acclimated or gotten used to the amount of oil that you're giving before you go and make any other changes to increase it. So if you're at 100 milliliters morning and night and you find that the roth is really loose, then just either back down a little bit or stay steady, but don't go for the 200 until you've seen that her manure is back to normal. The oil can help give calories to maintain, her health. It gives some vitamins as well, and it also makes the food easier to digest during the summer months. I keep oil in my horse's food all the time. And as I said, make sure that the grains are soaked for maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour before feeding, and break the meals down into smaller meals given at appropriate times. Again, the last meal of the day should not be so close to the time that the grooms sleep that if she were to go into colic, the grooms will not notice. So we want to leave, 3 to 4 hours between the last meal of the day, of grain meal, and the time that the workers will go to sleep. They did find that horses that have had a small amount of hay before they eat the grain have an easier time digesting the food, and also the sugars and starches that are in the grains do not have such a spike on insulin for the horses. So these are the things that I would focus on for mares during the hot season.
I would like also to add just one thing, that we're supposed to take care from the mother during pregnancy and after delivery, especially in the summer months, as you said. And we can keep the mother with the foal in a cool place, especially in the rooms for 45 days after delivery. It will be too important and necessary. You want to go to the most difficult situation you went through in your career. What is it, or what it was?
Well, my career has been kind of short so far, but so I can't really say that the most dramatic or drastic thing that I've gone through. Personally speaking, I think the thing that has made me feel or to حسب المسؤولية, يعني to feel the responsibility of giving advice. It's, when we give advice to people, we're responsible for the outcome, and always being humble enough to not think that you have all the answers. A lot of times I don't know something and I will tell the people who are asking me, I haven't studied that yet, or I don't have experience in that. Let me go ask somebody else for you, or let me get you in touch with a veterinarian, so on. I think being humble is the most important skill. It's a skill that somebody needs to develop when they are working in this type of situation. For me, it was a very, very severe skin infection. The whole body of the horse it was painful to look at it. And I was like, this is some kind of an allergy, and you treat it with iodine shampoo, leave it on the skin, and blah, 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 blah. And in the end, and this is maybe like 2 weeks later, I was reading about mite mange, and realized that that case was actually mange, not an allergic reaction or not a bacterial infection. And therefore, the protocol needs to be different because they need to kill the mites that are on the skin. And the guilt that I felt that probably this horse was still suffering, it's not necessarily a life-threatening at that moment, but over long term, the suffering that that horse is going to go through is incredible. The amount of itching and the pain that it's going through is severe. And so with the wrong diagnosis, I am the one responsible for causing that pain. I guess that's how I was looking at it. The worst case scenario that been through is where you've had a horse with colic, and unfortunately, due to the lateness that that horse was brought to our attention, there was no hope. And it's heartbreaking when you see that there's a possibility of preventing something from happening in the first place, and in the end that horse passes away. It's very hard emotionally to deal with it. The worst where I became extremely angry about the situation and angry with the situation that we are in here in Saudi Arabia with the lack of, we don't have enough hospitals. And so depending on where you're living, you either have access or you can send the horse. But like, let's say, for example, I have a horse in another city and I need to send my horse by trailer 3-4 hours to get to the hospital. By then, maybe the horse is dead. And we had a case of a horse, and I'm very partial, or I love gray dappled horses. And this mare was pregnant, and she was not, we say shabby, so she wasn't a registered horse. But if you look at her, you can tell that her breeding was top, top breeding. Her conformation, the genetics that she had were probably, very, very high. But because people didn't take care of the papers that they were given, they got lost or whatever. Therefore, when she's breeding, she's considered not a pure Arabian. And she went into colic, and it was 4 days that she had not been eating. She wasn't willing to eat. She wasn't really drinking. And when they finally came to me, I said, if she's not been eating and not passing anything, it means that she's got impaction either from a stone or worms, or a bulbous of food has gotten stuck in the intestines at some location, and you must send her to the hospital to be operated on. There's no other way. And yet, so this is a thing that is so difficult to deal with, is that I've got a horse, financially is worth to me, and her value is maybe very high, but financially, if I'm going to sell that horse, she's only 5,000 to 7,000 riyals Saudi, or let's say maximum $2,000. And if I send her to the hospital, the bill that's going to come back to me is around $5,000. So unfortunately, I can't save this horse, and they let her die. And again, the idea of causing pain, that severe pain, and slowly the horse is dying, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating.
It's heartbroken, actually. By the end, I want to ask you, what are the hopes and aspirations of Haneen in the field of equine medicine in general?
Wow, it's a big question, actually. On a personal basis, I'm completing the certificate for the equine science now, and I hope to continue with the diploma. If God gave me a longer life and I could go into veterinarian medicine, even if it were just as a veterinarian technician or nursing, veterinary nursing. They do have a program at Purdue, and really considering that. My most important goal is to be able to support owners and the welfare of horses. So as long as I'm able to do that, I'm reaching my goal at some point. I would love to be able to support the changes of whatever community that I am living in, wherever I'm living. And for right now in Saudi Arabia, I would love, to be a goal to be part of the efforts that the ministry is starting to make with, Dirab, and trying to revamp the protocols and the support system that they offer owners. I would just love it if as an organization we could offer owners some kind of educational program, even if we're online, and somehow offer some kind of financial remuneration to those people. So whoever is going to take these courses, instead of me having to pay for them, somehow make them free. And then whoever has completed the whole course will get some kind of a prize, or some kind of, monetary, or some kind of a benefit to them, whether it's free services, um, some kind of a support. So we encourage people to want to learn and to educate themselves. I think this at this point in the development in Saudi Arabia, I think the most important goal that we have now is educating owners on all of the project management when it comes to starting a stable, designing a stable, and onto feeding and managing the horse care and horse treatment. And then we can even add now saddle fitting, different kinds of bridles and how they affect the horse's mouth. We had a horse at the stable last week refused to do anything because he was in so much pain because of the way the bit was being used, one. Secondly, the type of bit that was in his mouth, he was refusing it. It was causing him pain. And when they changed the whole bridle, the horse was a completely different horse. And this is the third time that I've seen this recently happen, where the behavior of the horse was directly related to either the bridle or the saddle. And, when you ask people about the size of the saddle, and they said, oh, my horse is really fat, he needs a size 18. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but that has to do with the fatness of the rider or the height of the rider and not the size of the horse. So really, the biggest goal that I have is helping owners to want to learn. Go on the internet and search it. If there's not something in Arabic, come to me. Come ask somebody else, and don't ask just one person, ask 2, 3, 4 people, because you might find out that you get a different answer from these. One person tells you one thing and 3 people tell you something else. Go with those 3 people. So this is what I would I really appreciate, and I'm so honored that I can participate in this kind of a program as one of those goals. And I really hope that these kind of programs will continue, whether it's in the written form or online programs, applications, something that we can work towards helping people that deal with horses in general. Thank you so much, Dr. Shireen.
Thank you also, but we want to add just one question from Dr. Muhammad Boujbala, if we can.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you. Dr. Muhammad, you can join us.
Thank you a lot, Mrs. Haneen, for explaining all these questions. You said we have a lack of hospitals, and indeed, this is a really important issue. I want to know, in your opinion, how can we resolve this problem?
This is a very difficult question to answer because we don't want to lay blame at any person's feet. And the responsibility maybe is shouldered across many different parts of society. I think that I would start by requesting the authorities to revamp the licensing procedures, because we've had many cases where people wanted to open a clinic even. Okay, let's not even go towards the hospitals yet. Let's just start with clinics. And, the method of getting a hold of a proper license so that we can actually work in a legal scenario is quite difficult. And somehow it's like, I think that the government bodies need to understand, first of all, the desperation that we have, and then turn around and support us. How can they, as a government entity, support us providing legal and proper care for animals? And it's difficult on the owner. If I am going to build the building and put money into the microscopes and into the stalls and the rubber flooring and the drainage and all of the things that need to go into a proper real clinic, and then they come to do the accreditation and say no, so I've lost all my money. So when other people start to hear this, they become afraid to even make the step of starting. or requesting the license. You know, somehow it needs to be, okay, this is wrong, and from the beginning, because I've seen this in other countries where they have on their website all of the regulations that are needed for the building, for example. So the size of the rooms for the clinic, each room has to be blah, blah, blah size. The drainage in the floor needs to be this deep and of this width and this length, and needs to enter into what kind of sewage system. The sewage system from the outside needs to be, whether it's connected to the city water or to a sewage system where a septic tank. So all of these kinds of specifications, the height of the doors, the width of the doors, what are the requirements that are needed in a very detailed manner, so that anybody who wants to go and open up a hospital or open up a clinic, they can go to the government website and say, okay, I can follow this. And then once I've done that, imagine that I have not made the rooms the correct size, and then the government for the license come in and say, you need to break down that wall and increase the room. So the financial burden or the financial loss that happens to me is incredible. So we need to work together, right? So maybe if we have specialists who understand these specifications and encourage the government entities and say, yalla, let's work together. This is what I would love to see happen here. People in Jizan are suffering so much because trying to get a doctor for their horses when it's really even just an injury to, let's say you've got a big open wound. They're relying on each other and the expertise of maybe grooms in somebody else's stable to be able to deal with these kinds of situations. So it is a very critical thing. And once we've gotten where the licensing procedure is made easier without giving up the quality that the government wants to impress on people that are opening clinics, then we face the problem of where are the veterinarians qualified to work in these clinics or hospitals. And I've seen it as a very difficult thing. I did work with one stable in the Eastern Province to bring in a veterinarian, and unfortunately, due to mistakes that he made, there were several horses that died. Does that happen? Yes, I'm sure it does. No physician, whether human or veterinarian, is fail-proof, or we're human, you know, we make some mistakes, but we need to lessen the possibility of that as much as we can by hiring people that have excellent experience. And even if we have to bring them in from other countries, but we need to know who they are and how they work before we bring them in. Then we can take our new graduates from King Faisal, for example, and pair them with experienced veterinarians as mentors to help build the local pool of experienced veterinarians. I think that this is a very important step that needs to be made. We've got a lot of young graduates from King Faisal that are very passionate about equine care. And even in the equine hospital this past week, they had some of the students coming in to participate in different lectures. And that's another thing, that we can have more, even if I pay for it, and it's, let's say, 100 reals for the ticket, and I can go and participate in this lecture or that workshop, that seminar. We can increase these kinds of things. And the Saudi Veterinarian Society, I think it's called, had offered some lectures. The one that the one that I took was about problems in the breeding and it focused on different problems with both the stallions and the mares. And it was so well presented and so interesting, and the way that it was organized was perfect. Very, very valuable, very specific, detailed information, so that the viewers felt like they really got a benefit from that workshop or that seminar, even if it's offered online. And the last thing that I would say is that we do have a lot of people in the communities throughout the country, and I'm sure that this is the same with other countries as well, people who do have equine science information or very excellent, responsible veterinarians that can offer these kinds of small workshops, whether it's 45 minutes, whether it's 1 hour, and make the price available, whether it's 50 riyals, something that, we're not looking to get rich off of this. We're looking to cover our cost and our time. But our main goal is to give back to the community and help them to be able to deal with the problems that they have with where they're living. And this is really, if I could find a way to be involved with what's going on in the government to help with this, that's one of my dreams, because in the end, we're raising the level of the condition of the horses here in the country, and also making things better for the owners themselves, because in the end, when your horse dies, you've got a financial loss. So thank you so much, Mohammed, for this question.
Thank you, Haneen, and the words of thanks don't fulfill your right to being in our Dialogue family. Thank you for this valuable information that added a lot to us. We hope in the near future to run educational and awareness workshops for veterinarians, for technicians and breeders to reduce these problems that the horse faced. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure and honor. Thank you, Mohammed.
إلى هنا نكون وصلنا إلى نهاية حلقتنا. نشكر الأستاذة حنين لحضورها معنا وروايتها لتجربتها المميزة، كما بوسعكم اقتراح ضيف أو مواضيع على بودكاست حوار بيطري بمراسلتنا على saudi.channel@gmail.com أو على أحد حسابات البودكاست على منصات التواصل الاجتماعي. ولا تنسوا تقييم الحلقة على المنصة التي تستمعون منها، وبالإضافة إلى نشرها مع زملائكم في المجتمع البيطري. في سعة الله.